I have ruled the Voresh Hive Collective for 11 centuries. In that long time, I have seen many things. I have seen wars begin and end. I have seen new worlds join our hive, and old alliances fall apart. I have made countless decisions, and I have always believed that every choice in life comes down to one simple thing: a trade. You give something, and you get something back. This is how my people think. This is how I was raised to think. But everything I believed about giving and receiving changed on the day I met the family of a human named Marcus Webb, a man who gave up his own life to save my daughter and asked for nothing in return. Before I tell you about him, I must tell you about the world we lived in at that time. Humans and Voresh had only known each other for a short number of years. We were still learning how to speak with each other, still learning how to trust each other, still learning how our two very different peoples could share the same stars without fear. Many of my advisors did not trust humans at all. They said humans were too unpredictable, too emotional, too quick to act without thinking. I did not fully disagree with them, but I also did not fully understand them. I only knew what I had been taught, that humans were a young species, still finding their place among the older powers of the galaxy. We had built a small research outpost together, called Ilven, floating near a large gas giant. It was meant to be a place where humans and Voresh scientists could work side by side, sharing knowledge, testing new technology, and slowly learning each other's ways. It was not a place of danger. It was a quiet place, filled with laboratories, and living quarters, and long glass domes, where our different kinds of air were kept carefully apart, because what my people breathe would harm a human in moments, and what humans breathe is thin and useless to us. My daughter, Aelthara, was only a child then. She was curious in a way that worried me. She loved to explore, to open doors she was not supposed to open, to ask questions no one else thought to ask. I loved this about her, even when it frightened me. On the day of the accident, she had wandered, as she often did, into a section of the outpost near the human side of the station, simply because she wanted to see how their scientists worked. I was many light years away when it happened. A seal in one of the biodomes failed. This was not supposed to be dangerous. There were safety doors built exactly for moments like this, designed to close instantly and protect everyone on both sides. But on that day, the doors did not close properly. They jammed halfway, allowing the two different atmospheres to begin mixing together. For my daughter, standing on the human side of that broken seal, the air itself was slowly becoming unsafe to breathe. I received the emergency signal 94 seconds after the failure began. To an empire like mine, 94 seconds is nothing. It is less than a breath in the long history of my people. But for a small child trapped in a shrinking pocket of air that was slowly turning against her, 94 seconds must have felt like forever. By the time my first ships arrived, 17 minutes had passed. In those 17 minutes, something happened that I did not fully understand until much later, when I finally sat down and read every report, watched every recording, and listened to every witness who had been there that day. A human engineer, a maintenance worker named Marcus Webb, had been 3 sections away when the alarms began. He was not a soldier. He held no special rank. He was simply a man who fixed machines and kept the station running. He had a wife back on his homeworld, and a young daughter of his own, waiting for him to return one day. He had every reason in the world to stay exactly where he was, to let the trained emergency teams handle the crisis, to protect his own life so he could return home to his family. He did not do this. The moment he understood what was happening, he grabbed the nearest environmental suit, one built only for human bodies, and sealed himself inside the failing dome with my daughter. I have watched this moment on the recordings more times than I can count. He did not panic. He did not waste time. He looked at the situation with a kind of calm clarity that still amazes me, even now. He understood, within seconds, that there was only one suit and only enough air inside it for one person, and that this air was built for a human, not for a small Voresh child 3 times smaller than him. Any reasonable being, weighing every possible option, would have chosen to protect their own life. There was no rule that required him to give up his suit. There was no order that told him to trade his air for hers. There was nothing waiting for him on the other side of this choice, except his own conscience. He tore the suit apart with his bare hands. He rebuilt it, right there, in the middle of a crisis, reshaping equipment meant for an adult human into something that could fit a frightened Voresh child instead. He worked quickly, guided only by instinct and skill, adjusting the air filters, tightening the seals, doing everything he could to make sure that whatever air remained would go to her, and not to him. There was no way to build this new version of the suit and still leave enough air for himself. He knew this. He built it anyway. When the suit was finally sealed around my daughter, he held the broken parts of the dome closed with his own hands, using his body as a barrier against the harmful air, because even a partly broken shield was better protection than nothing at all, for however many more seconds it could hold. He stayed there, breathing air that was slowly turning against him, for the final minutes needed to keep my daughter safe, until help arrived. When my ships finally broke through and reached the dome, they found Aelthara alive, shaking, crying, holding tightly to a man who had already given his last breath. In his final moment of awareness, he had spoken softly to her, in broken pieces of our own language, words he had no official reason to know so well. He told her it would be over soon. He told her she was safe. He told her she was not alone. For a long time after this, I did nothing. Grief, among my people, is something we keep private. We do not display sadness openly, and I assumed his people would prefer the same quiet respect. I told myself I was simply honoring his memory by staying away, by allowing his family the space to mourn in their own manner, without an alien queen intruding on their sorrow. I understand now that I was wrong. I simply had not yet learned how wrong I was. Something about this event stayed with me in a way nothing else ever had. I found myself unable to close the matter the way I closed every other event in my long life. Normally, when someone serves my hive well, I reward them. When someone protects my family, I repay them. This is simple. This is fair. This is how balance works among my people. But there was no way to repay a man who was no longer alive to receive anything. Eventually, I requested to meet his family. I want to be clear that this is not something my people normally do. We do not visit the homes of those who serve us. Service is measured, rewarded, and completed, and then the matter is closed forever. But I could not close this matter. I did not know how. His wife, a woman named Elena, welcomed me into a small and simple home on a quiet green world, a place so different from anything in my empire that I found myself staring at the strange plants growing outside her window, wondering how such a fragile-looking world could hold such strong people. I remember arriving with a plan already formed in my mind. I had spent my entire long life learning that grief could always be answered with payment. I believed I understood value completely, because I had never before grieved for someone whose loss mattered more to me than anything I could offer in exchange. So I came prepared to give her enormous wealth. I came prepared to offer knowledge and technology that would elevate her family for many generations to come. I believed, foolishly, that this was the correct way to honor her husband's sacrifice. Elena looked at me with tired eyes, and she did not ask about wealth or technology or reward. She asked only one question. Was she scared? At the end? I did not expect this question. It was not about payment. It was not about honor. It was not even about confirming that her husband's choice had achieved something important. She simply wanted to know if a child she would never meet, belonging to a species she had never seen before, had been afraid in her final frightening moments. I told her the truth. I told her that yes, Aelthara had been afraid, and that her husband's voice had been the last comfort that fear had heard. I told her that his words had not been enough to make the fear disappear completely, but they had been enough to make sure my daughter was not alone inside that fear. Elena nodded slowly, and something in her expression seemed to settle, as though this simple truth was the only payment that had ever truly mattered to her, and now the matter was finally complete for her, in her own way. I could not stop myself from asking her the question that had followed me across the stars. Why had he done this? He owed my daughter nothing. He was not her guardian, her protector, or her ally. He owed the Voresh nothing more than the work written into his contract, and his contract certainly did not require him to give up his own life. Elena was quiet for a long moment before she answered. He used to say, she told me, that if you are the only person who can help someone, and you choose not to help them, then whatever happens next belongs to you too. He could not live with himself if he let a child suffer 3 feet away from him, simply because the air belonged to him first. I have thought about this sentence many times since that day. Among my people, worth is never separated from usefulness. Even our love is structured carefully, divided by rank and purpose. Until I sat in that small house on that quiet green world, I truly believed this was simply what love meant everywhere in the galaxy, a more graceful form of counting and balancing. Marcus Webb owed my daughter absolutely nothing. He gained nothing from saving her life. There was no honor his own people would recognize for this act, no advantage for his family, no benefit that would continue his legacy. He had a wife who loved him. He had a daughter of his own waiting for him at home. By every rule I had ever learned, he had every reasonable justification to protect himself instead, and no one among his own people would have called this choice a failure. And yet he simply could not become a person who let this happen. So instead, he chose to give up everything he had. Some years later, when Aelthara was old enough to understand fully what had happened and who she was thanking, I brought her back to that same small house. My daughter, heir to a hive that stretches across 40 systems, someone who could one day command fleets powerful enough to darken entire skies, knelt quietly on a stranger's floor and wept in front of a human woman she had never met before, because that woman's husband had rebuilt a suit with his own hands so that a frightened child could keep breathing. Elena held my daughter gently that day, the way I imagined she once held her own child, and I watched two very different beings, from two very different worlds, share a grief and a gratitude that needed no translation at all. I still do not fully understand humanity, even now, after everything I have seen. I do not believe I ever will understand it completely, not with the same certainty I understand my own people, because I do not think a species can truly be taught something it must choose for itself. But I have learned this much, and I hold it carefully. When every possible reward has run out, when there is nothing left to gain, and no one watching to give praise, that is exactly the moment a human decides who they truly are. Marcus Webb decided, alone, inside a dome filling with unsafe air, that he was the kind of person who could not let a child suffer within reach of his own two hands. We have no word for this in the language of my people. I have had 11 centuries to search for one, and I have never found it. I have only ever had his example. Since that day, I have changed the way my hive works with humans. I no longer see them as simply a young species still finding its place among older powers. I see them now as a people capable of something my own kind rarely shows, a willingness to give everything away freely, without expecting anything back in return. My advisors still argue that humans are unpredictable. Perhaps they are right, but I have come to believe that this unpredictability sometimes hides something remarkable, a kind of courage that cannot be measured, traded, or repaid. Aelthara grew up carrying this story with her always. She often visits Elena, even now, many years later. She has learned some of the human language, and she speaks of Marcus Webb the way our people speak of great heroes from ancient stories. Except this hero was real, and he chose his sacrifice freely, in a single quiet moment that no one forced upon him. I keep a small piece of that broken suit in my private chambers, the very suit he rebuilt with his own hands. It is not a grand or beautiful object. It is simply torn metal and worn fabric, but to me, it represents something greater than any treasure in my empire. It reminds me, every single day, that value is not always about what you receive, but sometimes about what you are willing to give away completely, expecting nothing at all in return. I share this story now, recorded carefully in our joint archive, so that both our peoples will always remember him, not as a soldier, not as a hero created by legend, simply as a man who chose, in his final moments, to be the kind of person who could not walk away from someone who needed him. I do not know if my own people could ever learn to do the same. I hope, someday, we might try.